Good morning, Good Shepherd.
Good morning, Deb.
Is the mic working? It does. Okay. So, most of you know me, I'm Deb Angerman. I'm your parish finance administrator here, but I'm also a certified lay speaker in the Methodist tradition, and so Christine lets me come about once a quarter and share a word with you. When I first became a Christian, I started reading the Bible with a passion, participating in a 4-year class that my church offered called Disciple Bible Studies. By the time I got to year 4, where we really dug into the Gospel of John, I remember approaching the final Gospel with a little trepidation. I really loved the action-packed Mark Gospel, and I loved the way Luke filled in and fleshed out some of Mark's Gospel by interviewing people that Mark hadn't included. So I just didn't really think John was going to measure up. I mean, why bother? It was just so different. But then I read it. I really read it, and it became my favorite of all the gospel testimonies we have about the life and good news of Jesus Christ. As if the meeting in the cover of darkness with Nicodemus and the glorious picture of Mary Magdalene in the garden with Jesus weren't enough, this epilogue of John's Gospel presents a magnificent portrait of the risen flesh and blood Christ, full of juicy glimpses into the lives of his original followers, especially Peter. If you read the chapter just before this, you'll see that it ends with Jesus sending the disciples out just as his Father had sent him. Yet, now we find 7 of the disciples, including 3 of his very closest, just sort of hanging out together one evening near the Sea of Galilee. They have seen the risen Christ twice already, and yet they're just kind of in a waiting mode, not really sure what to do and probably mulling over their inadequacies, not sure what comes next. Simon Peter, restless, suddenly announces, "I'm going fishing." And his 6 brethren immediately respond, "We'll go with you," as if they were just waiting for someone to suggest something for them to do. So they fished all night. Fishing by night was a common practice at that time and place. It still continues to this day. Many species of fish are more active at night, and they're not afraid of the nets because they can't see them. It usually worked, but not that night. So here they are, exhausted and ready to head back, when this guy out on shore hollers at them, "Hey guys, did you catch anything? No? Well, try throwing your nets on the other side of your boat." And for some odd reason, they do it. Now, maybe they were just too tired to fight with this stranger, this know-it-all on the beach, or maybe they had a strange sense of déjà vu. Because this story is a callback to the first call story found in Luke. Do you remember it? Jesus was being chased by a crowd who had been hearing about all of his miracles, and he gets to shore, sees Simon with his boat, and asks him if he'll launch out into the sea so that he could teach the multitudes from that vantage point. In that story as well, Simon, John, and James were exhausted after a night of fishing, yet when Jesus finished his teaching, he told Simon to throw his nets out for a catch. Peter reluctantly did as he asked, and the nets came back so full that they began to tear, and both his and Zebedee's boats began to sink under the weight. After they finally made it back to shore, Simon Peter fell to his knees, exclaiming, "Depart from me, Lord, I am a sinful man." But Jesus responded, "Do not be afraid. From now on, you'll be fishers of men." And the fishermen left everything behind and followed Jesus. So here we are, 3 years later, and this stranger on the shore is calling out to them to throw their nets out again. They weren't fishing for men, and they weren't doing such a great job fishing for fish either. But like the last time, they do as asked, and this time they caught so many fish they couldn't pull them on board. At that point, the penny dropped for the disciple that Jesus loved, and he exclaims, "It's the Lord." Peter grabs his tunic and jumps into the water to swim to shore because he wanted to be the first to greet his Lord. Interesting aside, in Jewish law, to offer a greeting was considered a religious act, and in order to perform a religious act, a man must be clothed. Thus, he threw his tunic back on before leaping into the water. So they get to shore, and they discover that they have caught 153 large fish. Why 153? It's such a specific number that's used in every translation that we have of this scripture. There are nearly as many hypotheses over that number as over the number itself. My favorite was posited by one of the early church fathers, Jerome, who said there were 153 kinds of fish, and they represented the men of all nations, and that one day all the nations would be gathered together for Christ, but this time the net would not break. So that was surprise number one. It was the Lord on the beach. Surprise number two was that he already had breakfast ready for them. He asked them to bring in a few of their newly caught fish, but then immediately invites them to sit down and join him for the breakfast he had already prepared. He did not need their fish, but he wanted them to participate. But here's the thing. He had been cooking the fish over a charcoal fire. And when was the last time we read about a charcoal fire? Matthew, Mark, and Luke all say that after Jesus was arrested, Peter stood outside the high priest's court warming his hands over a fire. But John 18:18 specifically says that Peter was standing next to a charcoal fire. I have a feeling that when Peter got to shore and smelled that fire, he probably thought once again, "Depart from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man." The sense of smell can be both heartwarming and triggering. Now, I love the smell of wood smoke. We have a wood stove in our family room, and in cold seasons, my husband will have that thing fired up all weekend, every weekend, and it's so comforting to me. Sometimes in the summertime, when the sun hits the glass just right and warms up the hardwood floors, the whole room smells like that wood smoke, and it just transports me to Christmas time or Colonial Williamsburg. Two of my favorite things, right? So many happy memories for me, but not for Simon Peter. Can you imagine being so excited that Jesus was on shore only to get there dripping wet and be hit in the face by the smell of that charcoal fire, instantly transporting him back to the lowest point of his life, the time he denied even knowing his Lord and teacher, the time he failed Jesus and his own best intentions to follow Jesus even to the grave. That breakfast must have been awkward. But this last breakfast transforms a moment of deprivation and insufficiency into a feast, with unexpected blessing available made to everyone. Jesus gave Peter the opportunity to redeem himself. The great theologian N.T. Wright points out that a rather extraordinary thing happens in the next part of this reading. Many translations don't pick it up, but it's very clear in the Greek. You see, when John he tells us the story, he's using two different words that are often just translated as love in English. When Jesus says, "Simon, son of John," notice he doesn't call him Peter, which is the name Jesus gave to Simon and means the rock. Instead, he reverts to Simon Peter's birth name and says, "Do you love me?" Here, John's using the big word, agape, the self-giving love word, which is all about God and the all-encompassing love that Jesus has for his disciples. But Peter can't bring himself to respond with that word yet. The nearest thing he can get to is the friendship word, the phileo word. So his actual response is, "Yes, Lord, you know I'm your friend." And Jesus responds, "Feed my lambs." So then Jesus asks him a second time, "Simon, son of John, do you agape me?" And Peter responds exactly the same, "Yes, Lord, you know I phileo you." And this time Jesus responds, "Feed my sheep." Now, at this point, you might expect Jesus to say, well, Simon, you really messed up. I thought you were going to be faithful, a strong foundation, a rock on which to build my church, but apparently you aren't. But Jesus doesn't do this. Instead, he ups the ante. Feed my lambs and my sheep. Because Jesus' natural posture is not the wagging finger. Instead, Jesus offers open arms, grace. So the third time he asks Simon Peter this important redemptive question, he says, Simon, son of John, do you phileo me? And Peter is hurt. I mean, he'd seen Christ twice already, and thankfully Peter's denials had never come up. Maybe he thought he could just go on pretending it had never happened. But Peter hadn't forgotten. Peter was still carrying the shame. And now it seemed like Jesus had deliberately set him up to remember that horrible night. First with the charcoal fire, and then calling him Simon, and then asking the same question 3 times in a row. And now this last time, dropping the intensity of love that he was asking for, from godlike love to brotherly or friendship love. I am sure that it is likely that Jesus knew exactly what he was doing. But it wasn't to make Simon Peter feel bad. It was to free Peter from the shame he was carrying. Jesus knew that Peter would never be able to forgive himself and serve Christ freely if he didn't face what he had done. So when Jesus adopted Peter's use of phileo, I think he was saying, okay, Peter, if that's where you are, that's where we'll start. Now, tend my sheep. Christ's forgiveness is implicit in his responses. He still wants and expects Peter to care for his church. Friends, that's how Jesus meets all of us. It's how he met Saul on the road to Damascus, and he was breathing threats and murder against the disciples. When we come to him again and again, knowing perfectly well that we've messed up, that we've got things wrong, that we failed to do what we promised to do, we may think to ourselves, well, he won't want anything to do with me now. But that's not true. Jesus is right there with us saying, okay, Deb, that's where you are right now. Let's start from there and move forward. Get out of the past. Let go of your failures, because I already have. And we know this is the case because after this remarkable interview, he makes a prophecy of how Simon Peter will die and then recommissions him with 2 simple words. Follow me. And Peter did. Position restored, he went on to become the first great leader of Christ's church. Resolute, rash, gentle, firm, this flawed, very human man could only become the true rock of Christ's church when he let go of the mistakes and accepted Christ's offer of redemption. And so it is with each of us. My prayer for each of you is that whether you are in a season of agape or phileo love for Christ, start from there and let him move you forward.